Coming up on The World Today. Iranians vote in presidential election marred by disqualification row. Israel to send 1 million COVID-19 vaccines to Palestinians in swap deal. Plus, California declares a state of emergency as part of U.S. Southwest report dangerously high temperatures. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Akaite Afia. Iranians are voting to elect a new president with all but one of the four candidates regarded as hardliners. The winner will replace incumbent Hassan Rouhani, a relative moderate who has served the maximum 2 terms. Descendants and some reformists have called for a boycott, saying the barring of several contenders has removed any genuine competition. The elections come at a time of widespread discontent among Iranians over economic hardships. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei cast his vote early on Friday morning in Tehran and encouraged people to go to the polls. We'll get more on that later, but still in the Middle East, at least 3 Palestinians have been injured after Israeli forces stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in occupied East Jerusalem. Following Friday prayers, Palestinian worshippers started a rally in support of the Prophet Muhammad in response to insults directed at him during a hardline Israeli march through the area on Tuesday. Palestinians gathered in the courtyard, but before they began their march from Al-Aqsa to the Old City's Damascus Gate, Israeli forces raided the compound through Bab al-Silisila, one of its entrances. They fired rubber-coated steel bullets, tear gas, and stun grenades, emptying the compound of thousands of worshippers. Some updates on the COVID-19 pandemic now. Israel will send at least 1 million soon-to-expire COVID-19 vaccine doses to the Palestinian Authority under a deal to share shots, after being urged to do more to ensure Palestinian access to vaccinations as it's inoculated its own citizens at world-leading speed. Here's more on this and other developments on our Global Update.
Israel will send no less than 1 million COVID-19 vaccine doses to the Palestinian Authority under a deal to share shots. This will serve as a boost for the Palestinians' vaccination campaign in the occupied West Bank and Gaza, as around 55% of eligible Israelis are fully vaccinated, while just some 30% of eligible Palestinians in the region have received at least one vaccine dose. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he is very confident about lifting the country's COVID-19 restrictions on July the 19th.
I'm very confident that we'll be able to go through with step 4 of the roadmap on the timetable that I've set out, with treating July the 19th, as I've said, as a terminus date. I think that's certainly what the data continues to indicate.
This comes just days after hundreds protested the possibility of an extension of lockdown measures. As the more infectious Delta variant continues to spread worldwide, Germany says it is a matter of when, not if, it will take over in the country. The president of Germany's Robert Koch has announced that they expect the Delta variant to become the most dominant by autumn. Just a day after her announcements to roll out coronavirus vaccine across the New Zealand, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern receives her first shot of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. The Pacific Island nation shut its borders and used tough lockdown measures to become one of the few countries to have virtually eliminated COVID-19 in the community. But the government is facing criticism for a slow rollout of vaccines.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has said his country needs to prepare for both dialogue and confrontation with the U.S., and especially to get fully prepared for confrontation. This marks the first time Mr. Kim has directly commented on President Joe Biden's administration. North Korea had earlier snubbed efforts by the new U.S. government to establish diplomatic communication. The U.S. has been calling for North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons, but Pyongyang has reportedly refused. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Maria Bird, joins us now to discuss more on this. Maria, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having me.
So this seems like a mixed message from the North Korean leader saying that the country is ready for both dialogue and confrontation. How is the U.S. administration reacting to this statement?
Well, the U.S. government has said before that it's ready to have some sort of a dialogue, that they're not looking for confrontation clearly. But again, they are not going to have the same approach to North Korea as former President Trump did. It is very clear that North Korea and some of the issues surrounding human rights has been a long concern of the U.S. government. And so we know that their conversation will be very different. So a summit between the two is very possible, but it's really going to depend on if North Korea is ready to talk about things. I think that the U.S. Is going to be a little different than previous conversations with previous administrations.
Well, as you did mention, former U.S. President Donald Trump was able to avoid war with North Korea. The country now has significant nuclear capabilities. President Biden has made a point of taking a different approach than his predecessor. So what's his play here? Is there any hope for improved relations between the United States and North Korea under his administration?
Yes, I think we can expect that potentially there will be some cooperation between the two. I mean, listen, President Biden has been a longtime diplomat and one that has dealt with various foreign relations. The real issue is going to be whether or not the conversations can begin around South Korea and North Korea, because President Biden is going to have a strong push to be able to unite North and South Korea and to be able to address the issues that are happening between the two countries. And so I think that if those conversations move forward, then we will begin to see that there will be greater conversation. But it's going to be heavily dependent upon if North Korea is willing to have a conversation surrounding human rights and, obviously, as you said, nuclear testing and nuclear missiles.
All right. Well, Maria, thanks so much for joining us on the program today, and do stay safe out there.
Thank you for having me.
California has declared a state of emergency to address power system concerns as parts of the U.S. Southwest reports dangerously high temperatures. An excessive heat warning is in place for much of Arizona and California and southern areas of Nevada and Utah. People are being told to stay in air-conditioned areas and out of the sun. Californians have also been urged to conserve energy during peak times as temperatures are expected to remain between 37 to 43 degrees Celsius until Sunday.
I think what we're seeing with climate change is that it is acting on and exaggerating all kinds of climatic conditions. And so it is making things worse. We're seeing more frequent fires, more severe fires. We're seeing them at a scale, not just in terms of area, largeness, but intensity plus area combining. I've got children. I've got grandchildren. What kind of world are they going to inhabit? It's going to be a very different one. If the climate change trajectory isn't flattened, then all those will be overridden. I mean, all those temporizing things, all those small-scale things we do, will simply be overwhelmed.
As we did mention earlier, Iranians are voting to elect a new president, with all but one of the four candidates regarded as hardliners. To speak more about this is VOA editor Michael Lippin, who has been following the story, and he joins us now. Michael, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Akaisi. It's good to be here.
So, amid disqualification rows and calls for a boycott, what's the turnout like so far? What are you hearing?
Thank you. Well, the main Western news agencies are reporting that the turnout so far is relatively low. That is according to the Associated Press, Reuters, the French news agency AFP. But when you look at what the Iranian state media are saying themselves, the Fars news agency, which is one of the officially approved state media outlets, it is saying that as of 1 p.m. Local time in Iran, there were 2.5 million fewer votes cast than in the previous election in 2017. So that is an acknowledgement from the Iranian side that the turnout is in fact low. Right now, it's about 8:30 p.m. in Iran. So I'm sure many more votes have been cast since that 1 p.m. estimate by the Fars News Agency. To give you a sense of how many voters there are in Iran, we have 59 million eligible voters. So the turnout, when all is said and done, is likely to be on the low side. Iranian state-approved polling agencies did say in the run-up to the election that the turnout could be as low as the low 40s in terms of percent. That would be a record low in Iran. The previous record low turnout for a presidential election was 50% in 1993. Now, other indications that the turnout is relatively low are coming from social media posts that we have been monitoring at the VOA Persian service. But in terms of what state media are showing, also we see the state broadcaster showing lines outside polling stations, but some people are noting that those lines are kind of tight shots, so they show a lot of people inside the frame, but it appears that outside the frame, the scene is a lot emptier than they would like us to believe. Now, the reasons for the low turnout are several. Analysts have been saying that Iran's poor economy has been dissuading a lot of people from voting. Iran has had one of the worst coronavirus outbreaks in the region. It has worsened an already weak economy that was hit by U.S. sanctions that were tightened in recent years. There's also a lot of disillusionment inside Iran with the restrictive electoral process, which actually banned most candidates who wanted to run for president from actually running in this contest.
Well, this is a very important vote for Iranians, and the winner will replace the incumbent Hassan Rouhani. So can you just talk to us a little bit about what the front runners, who they are, and what their platforms are in this race coming up?
Sure thing. Well, the clear front runner in this race is Ebrahim Raisi. He is the Iranian judiciary chief. He's 60 years old, and he was appointed to that role by Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, back in 2019. He is a close ally of Khamenei. He is also sanctioned by the United States. I was mentioning U.S. sanctions a short time ago. The U.S. has sanctioned Ebrahim Raisi for alleged human rights violations, including his alleged role in the mass executions of political prisoners in the late 1980s. If he is, in fact, elected president, he would be the first Iranian president to take office under U.S. sanctions. Now, I mentioned the disillusionment with the electoral process in Iran a short time ago, and that most candidates were banned from running in this election. In fact, Iran's Guardian Council only allowed 7 candidates to, in fact, run. One of them is Raisi. It also approved 6 other lesser-known candidates. Most of them, like Raisi, are on the more conservative side of Iran's political spectrum. But 3 of those 7 candidates actually dropped out yesterday. 2 of them were fellow conservatives like Raisi, who apparently didn't want to take votes away from him. The other candidate who dropped out yesterday was a relative moderate in this race, and that just left 4 remaining candidates. Besides Raisi, there are 2 other relatively unknown conservatives, and then 1 relative moderate who is remaining in this race, and his name is Abdul Nasser Hemati. He is a former Iranian central bank chief. Now, Hemati has promised to help revive Iran's economy. Given his financial economic experience, Abraham Raisi, the judiciary chief, has run on a platform of fighting corruption inside Iran.
Sorry, Michael, to butt in here, but that is actually all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us on the program and giving us some more insight into the elections there.
Sure thing.
Still to come on the program. Chinese authorities get comfortable in space as they activate Wi-Fi service in Tianhe core module. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. The number of people forced to flee their homes due to conflict, persecution, and human rights abuses has doubled in the past decade to 82.4 million at the end of last year. Now, that's according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees on Friday. The annual report on forced displacement by the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, says nearly 70% of those affected are just from 5 countries. That includes South Sudan, Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, and Myanmar.
In a year of COVID, in a year in which movement was practically impossible for most of us, we were locked down, confined, blocked, 3 million more people have been forcibly displaced. This proves, unfortunately, the tremendously negative power of war and violence. Old conflicts don't get resolved. Think of Afghanistan, think of Somalia. They even have ups and downs where they flare up again. We're very worried about what's going to happen in Afghanistan in the next few months. There may be more displacement. Indeed, we've seen more displacement. But then you have new flashpoints emerging, northern Mozambique, many places in the Sahel region of West Africa, northern Ethiopia, Tigray. All of these relatively new situations have produced more displacement. Also because symbolically this is a sign of global in a year of COVID.
Well, it's not only the United States battling with extreme weather conditions. Over the week, landslides and flash floods triggered by heavy rain across Nepal killed 11 people. Residents in Crimea, Brazil, France, and Mexico are also facing unpleasant situations due to flooding.
Heavy rain since Tuesday have damaged roads, destroyed bridges, washed away fish farms and livestock, and wrecked homes in Nepal. It has also resulted in the death of 11 people, with at least 25 people still missing. The monsoon rains, which normally begin in June and last until September, kill hundreds of people in mostly mountainous Nepal every year. Hundreds have been forced to move to community shelters, including schools, sheds, and tents. Authorities in Russian-annexed Crimea have declared a local state of emergency after heavy rain caused flooding in parts of the eastern region. The flooding affected nearly 300 homes and a city hospital. Whole streets were submerged in water in parts of the city. Some cars were almost completely underwater. In southwest France, storms have caused water to seep into houses and floodings on roads overnight. Thunderstorms are set to persist till today. Authorities in the country have raised its alert level to orange, the second highest warning. It's a similar situation in Mexico, where streets have turned to rivers in Mexico's southern city of Juchitán in Oaxaca, after heavy rains lashed the region and caused the local river to overflow into homes. Authorities report that about 1,000 homes are flooded, with locals trying to retrieve whatever belongings they could save. As floodwaters slowly recede, local authorities and residents are coming together to clean up streets and stop the spread of disease in this small city. Residents are bracing for further floods, with heavy rain predicted to go on until next week. And over in the Brazilian Amazon, villages have been devastated and residents are struggling to cope with severe flooding after heavy rain caused nearby rivers to swell.
The South African government has declared 10 days of mourning in honor of the former Zambian president, Kenneth Kaunda, who died on Thursday at the age of 97. In a recorded message, President Cyril Ramaphosa, who referred to the late leader as the father of South Africa's liberation, joined a long string of anti-apartheid struggle icons to pay tribute, highlighting the role of Mr. Kaunda played in a number of African countries while they were struggling for independence from colonial rule. Our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, reports.
Even up to his 90s, former President Dr. Kenneth David Kaunda was full of life with his many talents. Here, singing his song dedicated to his late wife of 66 years, Betty.
Every kiss was a sweet fragrant to your eyes, your lips, and your hair. On the dawn came to so.
Tons of messages of tribute have been sent out to Zambians and the late leader's family since news of his death came out.
As the South African nation, we will never be able to repay the debt of gratitude that we owe to Kenneth Kaunda. Nor will we ever forget that it was with the help of this extraordinary leader's care and solidarity that our freedom and our democracy was won. Today, we recommit ourselves to building the Africa of KK's vision, an Africa which is at peace with itself, Africa with justice, prosperity, and innovation.
Born on the 28th of April 1924 in Chinsali, Zambia, the youngest of 8 children, Dr. Kaunda grew to become Zambia's first post-independence president from 1964 to 1991. He was at the forefront of not just Zambia's struggle for independence, but also supported other African countries like South Africa to attain freedom from oppressive rule. He also championed Africa's fight against HIV and AIDS after he lost a son to the disease.
One Nigeria, one Namibia, one Africa. In remembrance of this great leader who made such a contribution to our freedom, we've decided to declare a period of mourning for 10 days in his memory, and that for the 10-day period, our national flag will fly at half-mast, starting from today. May his soul rest in peace.
Meanwhile, a 21-day mourning period has also been declared in Dr. Kaunda's home country, Zambia. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
Well, we end the program today in space, where the Wi-Fi service in the Tianhe core module of China's space station has been activated. China's Shenzhou 12 manned ship launched on Thursday morning, completing orbital status setting after entering the orbit, and conducted a fast autonomous rendezvous and docking with the front docking port of Tianhe. After spending a night in the core module, the 3 astronauts, Ni Haisheng, Liu Boming, and Yang Hongbo, installed Wi-Fi. And then they will unpack the daily necessities from the cargo ship and move more equipment to the core module, which is expected to take about a week. The astronauts will stay in space for 3 months. It is China's 7th manned mission to space and the first in the process of building China's space station. It is also the first in nearly 5 years after the country's last manned mission. Well, that's all for the program today. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Akaite Apia. Have a great weekend and stay safe.